If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you'll know that the original Tomb Raider is a firm favourite of mine. Where other titles in my gaming equivalent of Desert Island Discs have been relatively easy experiences to share with my kids, I lacked a good solution for Tomb Raider. Until now. The Saturn and PlayStation versions presented a choice: the correct aspect ratio at a slower 50Hz, or a vertically stretched image at the full speed of 60Hz. An option I only had through owning modified hardware, as even RPSN downloads on PS3 and Vita are the 50Hz PAL versions. Well, unless we set up a US account and find a way to add funds to it, but that again involves jumping through hoops, and Sony have already tried to close that store once. Meanwhile, the PC version offered the best of both worlds: full speed at the correct aspect ratio, but required and came packaged with DOSBox. In my case, I also had to use Xpadder to map the bizarre keyboard controls to an Xbox controller, mirroring the PlayStation layout I was familiar with. While community-made mods and updates significantly improved that experience and solved some of those problems, crowding around my PC monitor didn't provide the same feeling as sinking into the couch to play as a family in the living room. If my unusual enthusiast setup still delivered compromised solutions, then the average consumer, the layman on the street, certainly didn't have an easy answer to the question, how can I revisit the classic Tomb Raiders? Sure, we have Tomb Raider Anniversary, which can still be purchased and played on Xbox One and Series consoles, as well as PC. But that's a from-the-ground-up reimagining. In the developer's own words, it's a new game inspired by the original. In my opinion, it's also a worse game, but hey, I already did an entire video on that subject. Thankfully, Tomb Raider Remastered released on Valentine's Day, Lara Croft's birthday, bringing the original trilogy to modern platforms with a new lick of paint and several quality of life upgrades. Does this finally give me the option I've been searching for? Yes and no. First and foremost, this is now my favourite way to play the original Tomb Raider. This is the version I'll be firing up from now on. I do have some minor and major gripes, stay tuned for those, but yeah, I am incredibly happy with what's been delivered here. Is this something I can share with my family? Not really. My wife and kids will happily watch me play, but that intrigue turns into frustration the moment that I hand them the controller. I love tank controls. They make perfect sense to me, but I also grew up with them and have been a tad indoctrinated by not only Tomb Raider, but Croc, Siphon Filter, Resident Evil, Fear Effect, Galarians. You get the idea. My 9-year-old son just cannot get his head around them, and he recoils at the mere suggestion of using the D-pad instead of the analog stick. It ain't happening. To Aspire's credit, they did add an option for modern controls based on Tomb Raider's Legend, Anniversary, and Underworld. The problem is that the grid-based nature of Tomb Raider's level, trap, and challenge design were built around the tank control scheme. I did try the new controls, however, I struggled to get through even the tutorials in Lara's home. At the risk of repeating some of my review of the original Tomb Raider, Lara has a variety of jumps which all cover different distances and serve a variety of purposes. We have a 2-tile standing jump, a 3-tile running jump, and a grab that allows us to reach ledges up to 4 tiles away. We can also jump sideways or do a backflip, which is essential for placing ourselves on a slope facing the right way for a follow-up jump. As you might imagine, there are several sections in the game where it is critically important that we choose the right jump for the situation, else we will send Lara to a painful death. In the modern controls, a standing jump is just about doable if you're quick on the inputs, but trying to do a side jump or backflip just results in a standard jump in that direction. We also cannot tap backwards to set ourselves up with the perfect distance for launching into a running jump, as the tutorial voiceover still teaches us to do. While we could probably beat the first game using these controls, we certainly won't be getting all of the secrets. I can't imagine how we would approach this series of optional jumps in St. Francis Folly, for example. I'm also aware that there are some more technical mandatory jumps in the sequels, which I believe will present a problem. Aspyr have retained the walk button, so maybe they could make it so that we can hop backwards and do the other jump types while that walk button is held down in a future patch. That could, theoretically, give us the best of both worlds. One input they have changed across both control schemes is options. Rather than acting as start and opening our menu, it switches graphics modes. I love this feature in remasters, and I'm so happy that, following Halo Anniversary, more and more re-releases are making this a standard feature, even if I constantly activated the toggle when trying to switch guns or use a medipack. Sadly, the classic mode also seems to slice the frame rate in half, and, on the PS5 version I played through, also has some of the choppiest frame pacing I've experienced in a while, leading to a stuttery experience that makes classic mode practically unplayable. This coming from a guy who put up with the Saturn's poor performance. It's a massive shame, as I could otherwise see myself doing a run entirely in the classic graphics just for the nostalgia hit. As a result, I played this release almost exclusively in the new graphics, and I am mostly in love with them. I adore the direction that they took here. I remember growing up thinking, man, imagine if in-game graphics looked as good as the cutscene graphics. And we're now in an age where, yeah, that's a stylized FMV Lara, fully playable. We even get improvements like lip-syncing during in-engine cutscenes instead of just bobblehead motions, and subtitles that finally reveal what the hell some characters were saying. I'm not a fan of everyone's new models. I always imagined Larson with a much squarer jaw, and everyone sort of looks like a Sims 4 character, but generally speaking, this is a massive improvement over the 1996 outing. It does mean that Lara now looks better in-game than she does in the AI upscaled pre-rendered cutscenes, an inverse of the situation we used to have. These cutscenes haven't survived very well, with text in particular getting destroyed. They don't stack up against fan efforts made as mods for the original PC release, which is disappointing as these remasters were largely handled by a team of fan enthusiasts, in a similar vein to Sonic Mania's development team. Part of me wishes that they had remade these cutscenes with new assets. The loading screens that we very briefly see thanks to the speeds of the PS5's NVMe imply that some of the models unique to these scenes were recreated in order to produce these new renders, so it doesn't seem impossible. What we got ends up feeling like a bit of a half measure. I did have some graphical glitches, like the effects taking a second to turn on at the start of Atlantis, this doorway in the Tomb of Tihocan showing a black void, or this water tile in St. Francis Folly being replaced with a Renaissance-era painted portrait? What? Thankfully, unlike Anniversary, which swapped out Atlantis' grotesque body horror for clean black slate adorned with golden glyphs, this game gives us the same pulsing, fleshy goop that I adore. The new textures were surprisingly faithful to the originals. When we switch graphics modes, we realise that the rocky walls aren't just using any old new textures. The bumps, grooves, moss, and snow all fall in exactly the same place. Of course, that also means any textures that were stretched, warped, or had very obvious seams still suffer from all of those issues. I wish the team had taken the creative liberty of fixing those up. Likewise, while I appreciate the grid still needs to be visible and readable from a gameplay and navigation perspective, I wonder if Aspyr could have kept the original maps for collision detection while using higher polygon visuals for the environment. For example, there are walls with columns and other features painted on, as they were in the original, that could have been modelled without impacting gameplay. Several assets are replaced. Midas' statue is completely remodelled with a new colour treatment, and several objects that were quadrilaterals in the original are now rounded and smooth, with the Sphinx faces in Egypt being completely redone. But the application seems inconsistent, lacking equity. I can't make sense of why some assets were remade, while the geometry of others were left alone. At the very least, if making higher poly walls with the original collisions would have caused player confusion, could they have used displacement maps to imply depth by taking advantage of modern lighting and rendering techniques? It seems the engine can handle it, as a parallax effect is used for ladders in the later games, with varying degrees of success. Overall, this is still the best looking version of the original Tomb Raider, and I adored seeing the extra detail, vegetation, and draw distance. One change I'm mixed on is the addition of more light sources and skyboxes. In the original game, anything more than a few feet away was black and foreboding. We got the impression that Lara entered a location and then went deeper underground. The Lost Valley, Colosseum, and other key locations all felt enclosed, buried, hidden, and forgotten. Opening them up to the sky makes logical and practical sense, but whenever I played the opening level of Tomb Raider 2, I would get Lara topside and think, couldn't the helicopter I arrived in have just dropped me off here instead? I now get a similar feeling of, oh, Lara could have saved herself a lot of effort if she had known when playing Tomb Raider 1. That might just be a me thing, but what definitely isn't is the visibility of items in the modern graphics. In the Tomb of Tehokan, I needed 2 rusty keys to progress, but I could only find 1. Look at this screen. Can you see the key? How about now after switching to classic graphics? The keys are much smaller, and their colour causes them to blend in with their environments. Even knowing where the damn things are, I still missed one, and I've seen a ton of Reddit posts and tweets about others having the same issue. It's severe enough that, despite the performance hit, there were sections of the game that I played in classic mode just to make key items easier to see. This needs to be patched urgently. Another change that tripped me up is the save system. The console versions of Tomb Raiders 1 and 3 used save crystals, while their PC counterparts, and all releases of 2, let us save anywhere. This remaster adopts the PC approach of saving whenever and wherever we want. I found out, the hard way, that the first option is load game, not save game, and I set myself so far back so many times, sometimes by an entire level, that it's not even funny. The other issue was that, with the save crystals gone, so were my visual reminders and cues to save, so I kept forgetting to save. Don't get me wrong, save anywhere is handy for areas that I know I regularly screw up, but man, this was a downgrade for me. Thankfully, New Game Plus restores the save crystals. It's just a shame that we have to unlock the option first. The other issue is that we can make saves that softlock our game. Case in point, we should only enter this part of the system when the level is flooded, and Core put spikes there to stop us in the original game. Sadly, Core forgot that we can safely lower ourselves onto spikes, something we have to learn to do in order to access a secret in the Tomb of Qualopec. Aspire didn't fix this. We can still lower ourselves down there and become trapped, as the final door won't open and we can't climb back out, in a level that's already a progression blocker for many people. All it would have taken is making that first drop a few blocks steeper so that, if the spikes don't kill Lara, fall damage will. After all, we swim through the flooded version anyway, so this change would still preserve the developer-intended method. Or they could have just made this door open once you collect a gold key, regardless of whether the chamber is currently flooded or not. My advice would be that we have 32 save slots per game. Use them. Make a new save at the start of each level. We can use the restart level option after a death to prevent losing an entire game's worth of progress, but it's still a good idea to use multiple save slots. It also gives us a little homemade level select once we've completed the adventure. Speaking of levels, we get some new ones. all of the previously PC-exclusive bonus levels are available on console for the first time. Yes, there were, air quotes, other methods to access this content before now, but they've never been this easily and officially available. This is my first ever time playing these bonus levels, and it's so strange feeling utterly lost for the first time in decades, despite the familiar textures and enemies. That said, I think I accidentally skipped the majority of Atlantean Stronghold, as the level abruptly ended shortly after making this sketchy looking jump. One minor gripe from the original that this version fixes is that Lara's home, the tutorial, is now the first option on the main menu, making it less likely that people will skip it. That said, when it loads in, Lara's braid is doing whatever this is. What a stunning first impression. Still, at least Lara finally has her ponytail in the playable sections of her first outing. The remaster also helped me see this old favourite in new lights and make new discoveries through its trophies. Now, these leaked ahead of time, and I assumed they were fake due to the spelling, grammar, and language used, but no, that was the real list. Still, reading the descriptions immediately made me think, where can I fall so far that Lara screams twice? Ooh, the very end of Atlantis! It invited a sense of play and experimentation that revealed I didn't know about everything Lara's first outing was hiding. We also get a photo mode because, of course we do. And yeah, this was a fun and novel inclusion. Super handy for making YouTube thumbnails. Of course, this also means that we now have a 40-page end-user license agreement and no physical release too. Modern gaming, everyone! Gotta love it. You may have noticed that this review focuses on Tomb Raider 1, and cards on the table, I would have happily paid the price of admission for the original game alone, but this remaster collects the first 3 titles. As well as being my first time playing Unfinished Business, this will also be my first full playthrough of Tomb Raider 2. Yes, you heard me correctly. Tomb Raider 2 never came to the Sega Saturn, and by the time I bought a PlayStation, the current entry was Tomb Raider 3, so I skipped Tomb Raider 2, only ever playing the first level or seeing glimpses of later stages at friends' houses. By the time I came back around to finally play it, I was all too aware of the 50Hz slower speed of my local European releases of many games. But this remaster finally gives me a good option. I wonder how I'll get along with this long-overlooked sequel to one of my all-time favourites. Maybe you should subscribe to the channel so that we can find out together. Huge thanks to my Patreon supporters Chuckleson, welcome back, Crow, Tiny Jericho, Mr. Terry Chaos, Ducky Go, Francis T218, and Deliberator, who enjoy early release scripts, audio, and other goodies. You can join them at the link in the description. In the meantime, you can support the channel for free by liking, commenting, and sharing the video around.